This is an overview to Adobe InDesign CC. The version I'm using is 2015.4 and it's now August 2016, and this is the current up-to-date version. Right, now Adobe InDesign is a paste up program. Traditionally, before you had computers, you would glue bits of paper down and pictures, and either they would be photocopied, or before photocopying, it would go to a printer and they would make up screens and print them. So that's the principle you're using. You have a pasteboard, you have pages on there, and you're moving objects around, text, headings, body text, images, to make an image. Ideally, you're just assembling your design. It's not necessarily something that you would design everything in. You wouldn't design a logo probably in InDesign. You would use Illustrator to do that. You wouldn't be using it to edit photographs, but you'd use something like a bitmap program like Photoshop to do that. So all it is bringing together lots of different elements, moving them around and pasting them down onto a page. You can go and get it properly printed, or it can be photocopied or printed out in your printer. Mostly these days you probably might be doing things that would be saved as a PDF. You'd be making leaflets, brochures, magazines, flyers, that sort of thing, or documentation if you're working on a project. Okay, so I'm using a Apple Mac. There's slight difference in the interface if you're using a Windows PC. The big difference will be, obviously, cosmetically it looks different, but finding the preferences on Apple Macs, certainly with many programs, and certainly with Adobe, you would go to the InDesign menu, which you don't have on a PC, and you go to preferences, and that brings up all your preferences here. If, for example, you're using Windows PC, you go to the edit menu and you would find the preferences there. Now I've just opened up the program. I want to create a new document. Two ways I can do that. I go to the file menu and new document, or I can click on here. Depending on what the version is and how this welcome screen is laid out, might be slightly different, but we'll go ahead and create a new page. Now what we do is we have the new panel appears. Now there's a page behind here, and the reason being is I've got the preview on. Now if you didn't have preview on, this wouldn't appear, but having the preview checked is a handy thing to have. Now at the top it's got default, and underneath it's got intent, and it's got print. And as I said before, this is for making printed documents. So traditionally they go for print, but like I said before, you'd be doing things for PDFs, for documentation, magazines, or distributing. And even now you can create a PDF and send it to a printer. Now, like most programs, they're leading towards doing things for the web, so it's got some web functions, and the only thing that happens with the web functions is it's got sizes that you can do in pixel dimensions to match certain screens, or you can come up here and go mobile, and that will give you sizes for iPads and Android devices. Now ideally, the way responsive design works, that you probably wouldn't be targeting something towards that, and in normal practice with something like InDesign, you would be making something like that you print or make into a PDF, rather than making something that would appear on like an interactive element. You can do interaction in here, making sort of little mini apps, but I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so we'll just go for print. Now you can say how many pages you want. So if you're creating a magazine, you might say I want 20 pages, and you can type that in. Or you can say what's going to be start page. So say, for example, you might have a cover and you want the first sort of numbered page to be after that cover, because you don't want to number your cover. Now you can have facing pages, and this is what they call double page spreads, like magazines. Now, if you're getting something properly printed, it's going to get bound and stapled. Sure, go for facing pages, and the printer will sort that out for you. And InDesign is geared up to doing that. If you're just going to do a PDF, ideally facing pages, wouldn't be a thing you'd do. So I'll turn that off. Now, primary text box means you create a page, and each page has a text box on it already to put in some text. Ideally, in InDesign, you're copying and pasting rather than typing in body text, because it's not a very good comfortable environment to type in lots of text. It's all right for doing headings, etc., and moving things around, but you know, typing in there, it's not so good. Now, when it's got page size, it has a number of sizes, not a lot, because mainly you're probably going for custom sizes when you're printing things, doing business cards, flyers, etc. You can change the sizes and override them if you want. It's got orientation, so you can have landscape or portrait. You can have columns. So if I say here, you can see on the background, I'll move that out of the way. You can have a number of columns and it's previewing it. So these are just guides if you want to lay things up. Also, I can take up the gutter, which is the space between the columns, like that. Then we have margins, and you can take the margins up here and make the margins bigger or smaller. If you unlock this, it will just do them individually, so only one of them will change, or you can lock it and do them all. Now, at the bottom here, we've got slug and bleed. Now, slug and bleed is ideally just for if you're taking something to be printed. Now, if I put 3 on there, and click in the other box here. Now what that done is put a red line around the edge. So if you're taking something to be printed and it's got a photograph right on there or a colored background, when they cropped it, if you've done it too close to the edge, you might get a little bit of white where it hasn't, where it's missed a line on the crop. Now by pulling it out by 3 millimeters, it gives a margin for error. So when they cut it, you don't have any sort of white appearing down the side where it's not totally aligned. So only need that if you are having something printed and it's you know, an image that needs to be cut. Doing a PDF, probably you just don't need to use a bleed at all. And the slug is just information that printer uses. It might be how it's going to be cropped, what the print job is, because they might have a number of them so they don't get them mixed up. And also it might have color printing information or alignment on there. So neither of those you probably need to worry about if you're just going to export to a PDF. I click OK to that. Now we'll have a look here. We've got the standard menu bar like all programs have, which is up at the top, and you've got, because it's an Apple Mac, you have the InDesign menu, you have the file menu, which has all the things you expect to see in a file menu. It has new things in here on the bottom where you can search for Adobe stock if you subscribe to Adobe Creative Cloud. It has outputs for different types of PDFs and quality. You can also publish your work online. Again, this is to a Creative Cloud. It has a document setup or document presets if you define them. Usually they're not there unless you set all those up what you regularly use. Has user information, has file information, which I think is an XML file with lots of information about that file. And then you have package. Package is, if you're working with InDesign, very similar to if you're making a HTML page and it has linked images, JPEGs, PNGs. InDesign works in the same way. You have your document, and then it has all these linked files, which could be vector-based files or bitmap files, and it keeps track of them all. And when you say package, it will sort of gather everything together and put it in one folder so there's no broken links if you're going to take it somewhere else to be printed. So that's what you usually do when you've finished and you're going to take it somewhere else or export it to a disk. Then it has print presets if you have those things, and also it's got print and print booklet if you were going to do things, if you double page spreads and print things out. Edit menu, again, normal things you find in an edit menu, cut, paste, etc. Further down, you've got color settings and profiling, and keyboard shortcuts are also there so you can amend them. Layout has information about adding pages, although you can come over to the side here and do that from a panel if you wanted to. Lots of things, commands are in here and duplicated. You've got margins and guides, which will open a panel which you can change. So all these things, anything to do with layout, go to a page. You can create numbers and sections, so you can have numbered pages. You can create a table of contents, very similar to if you're using Word and you're writing a report and you want to have headings and they all link together on the contents page. Type, lots of options for type in there. You can create your fonts, size, has characters. You can create character styles and paragraph styles. InDesign is fantastic for creating styles and style sheets. Again, these are very similar if you're using web design and you've got Cascade and style sheets. They've used style sheets for a very long time in paste up programs like InDesign, and that's where the power is. You bring in some text and you already have a style sheet and you apply that, and that's how you can get consistency throughout your design work. That's very important to learn how to use styles, because especially if you go and work somewhere doing design work, you know, style sheets will be a big part of what you do. There's notes, you can track changes. This is if people working collaboratively, you can say accept a change if someone says this wants to be corrected or changed. There's bulleted lists, lots of things, special characters and white space, anything here to do with layout and of text. Now the object, again, this is to do with an object on your page where you can customize it, have effects on it. It's got filters, you can change it around, but clipping paths and masks on there. Has interactivity, which I mentioned before, which, you know, you can create interactivity, but ideally you're doing things for layout and paste up. And then it has options for paths. Paths in InDesign are really used for masking off images, certainly if you want to make what they call alpha channels, where you want to make a background transparent or cut things out. Paths are more common if you're using Adobe Illustrator. So if you're making logos, that's what you would use paths in. You know, trying to do lots of editing and creating paths in InDesign is not a good idea. So do that in Illustrator, save it as a vector file, and then import it in here and lay it out and paste it up. You can create tables, so if you want information here in tables, it's facts and figures, then you put that in here. View menu, that's what it says. You can create your guides, you can create baseline grids, which we've got another screencast on there. Lots of different things for extras where you can hide different things, and structure of your page, and also what's visible. In the screen mode, it can set things up for proofing for different colors and give you a print overview and what the pasteboard's like. Window menu is all the panels that are currently closed will not have a tick next to them. That's the same with all Adobe products. And you've got layers and all the different options, and that's where you would bring those out. So if I wanted to go stroke and click on here, it would bring up stroke, and that's a fly out over here, and you can adjust it, and it's got color over there. Okay, now that is the menu up at the top. Now I will just create a quick shape here. I'll just go and get the shapes, and then I'll come up here and I will just make this black, so I've got an object on here. Now once I've created an object, I'll go and get the top tool on the top left, which is the selection tool. Selection tool is quite common in design programs. Adobe ones, it's black, and what that means is just getting an object and moving it around. Now underneath that you have the direct selection tool, and it can move objects around, but if you have separate objects, mostly it's for if you've got compound object which is made up of lots of different elements, it will select a separate element. So that's what you would use that for. Again, that's the same as what you use in Illustrator. The page tool is for customizing your page, so I could select my page and make my page smaller if I wanted to. It's got the sizes up here. If I come along and go, I don't want it A4 anymore, I want to make it smaller, you can do it up at the top. Then we have gap tool. Again, I won't show you how these work. There'll be another screencast, we'll look at those. Gap tool is just changing the gap between objects. Underneath here we've got the content collection tool, and what that's for is snippets that you use a lot. If you have logos or images you're using a lot in your design work, you make a little scrapbook of all these different elements that you commonly use, and you can just drag and drop them and put them into your design. Underneath that we have the text tool, a type tool. You can have just ordinary text, or you can lay it to a path. Now once I've done that, you will see it's changed to all my text elements, because the top bar here is content sensitive, and once I've gone that, I can type in, and that's where I would make things larger and smaller, which again I won't go into too much detail, but you have all the options for customizing it up here, and those will appear. So that's how you would do text. Underneath that we have the line tool, and again it will change for the options that will be able to customize the line tool. Underneath that is a pen tool. As I said before, ideally in InDesign you would be using them for just masking off areas or masking off images. You wouldn't really be doing design work such as logos in here. It's more comfortable to do that in something like Adobe Illustrator or another similar vector-based program. InDesign is just paste up, bringing all those elements and laying them up. Underneath that we got the pencil tool. Now pencil tool, you are drawing again, maybe drawing bitmaps, lines or sketching. That's more or less for a bitmap program like Photoshop or another similar image editor, rather than, you wouldn't want to edit images in InDesign. You edit it in something else, save it as a TIFF or a JPEG or a PNG, and then bring it into InDesign. Now underneath here we have the frame tool. Now how it works is you have an image. So if you want to bring in an image, if I just drag out that, you can see the frame tool has crosshairs on it. And what I will do is then say place something in there. So if I go File, and I go down to Place, then I would select an image, click OK to that, and open, and that will then put it inside that frame. Now you can scale it and open it up, and we will do that probably in another screencast tutorial, but that's what you would use a frame tool for. Lots of different shapes you can use that for. You can put it in round shapes or custom shapes if you wanted to. Underneath that is what we used before, is the ordinary shape tool, and that's just for doing more graphic-y elements that you would put on there. Once you've done that, I would go up to the top here and maybe give that a color. Okay, I'll just close that down, go back to my move tool. The scissors tool is for cutting objects. That's very similar to what you find in Illustrator, and ideally if you're going to do that sort of work, there may be occasions where you might do this in InDesign. More or less you would be doing that in something like Illustrator and then bringing them in. Underneath that you would have the free transform tool. Also you would scale an image if you wanted to, or rotate it. There are other options for doing that, but they're there. Then you would have gradient, so that would be if you wanted to have two different colors that you wanted to gradiate between, to change the colors. Then if we move down, we have the feather gradient, which transparent to solid. That's what you would use there. Underneath that is the notes, so you can leave notes if you're working collaboratively on certain elements. Underneath that you have the color theme or the eyedropper, and also you got the measurement tool, which you can measure objects if you wanted to see how big they are, so you can go across and see what the measurements are if you wish to use that. Underneath that we have the hand tool. Hand tool is moving your page around if you zoomed in. We have the zoom tool where you can zoom in, zoom out. Underneath that we have the colors for the swatch and the stroke and the fill. Underneath that you have where you would set the colors back to their default settings, which is black for the border and white for the color. Also it's got other options to do with if you want to apply colors and bring those in and change them around. Now up at the top, as I mentioned before, if you click on text, these will change to match. So you've got all your text formatting up at the top. You can also create columns inside text boxes if you wanted to. So you can have columns inside a text box. So you've got lots of options up at the top, and that is depending on which tool you're currently using. It will give you the options for it. Now, these we'll look at in other tutorials, but they're using for scaling images or customizing different elements or the page. Over on the right side you have these different elements which are for pages and layers. They have layers as you would do in Photoshop, and you can turn those on and off as you would do in Photoshop. You can actually reorder your layers, so you can bring things to the front or send them to the back. So you can have layers to organize your work, which is very useful, slightly different than Photoshop because you don't have these big visual previews on them, but they're really useful. You wouldn't have very complicated layers in any case. So you've got lots of different options here, and as I mentioned before, you can go to the window menu and bring other options or other panels to open them up, and they will open them here. Now sometimes they appear in the center screen, and you can bring them up and you can just have them here so they work as a flyout. If you don't want them as a flyout anymore, you drag and you can drop them and change them here, so you can drag out your panels if you wanted to have them floating. Now lastly, you've got up at the top where it's got essentials, so you can change it to something like, okay, I'm using typography. So once you're using typography, it will give you all the different options for if you're using typography. If you're doing something like digital publishing, you change that around, it gives you all the options of digital publishing. Ideally, probably leaving it on essentials and then using it from there. But if you do want to change the workspace to something more specialist, that's how you would do it. If everything gets messy, you can go to reset, and that will reset your options back to the default. Here on my side that has come along, I've got a library here which I've got stock images, which are Adobe stock images, and then also it's got different graphic elements, which is a little scrapbook that I've got from Adobe Creative Cloud Assets, and then I can just drag images from there and put them on the page. It's gone a little bit too big, so I'll just drag that, and there we have it. Okay, so that's just a bit of an introduction to the workspace of using Adobe InDesign CC for just getting started and a rough idea of what the different options and workspace can do.